Hi, my name is Alana Beitz. I'm a journalism student at RMIT, and for the next few minutes I'm going to walk you through the world of online comments on news articles and the developing movement towards audience engagement in news production. The comment box is a bit of an early internet relic. It's managed to avoid updates or much consideration in the last 2 decades of the online era. For audiences to engage more deeply with writers, the journalism industry needs to move away from the limitations of the standard comment box and towards something a bit more engaging, a bit more interactive, and a bit more reflective of modern digital communication. Now, we're all aware of the downside of comments. Trolls have thrived in this environment. They've been abusing other commenters and journalists. This turns users away from commenting and led the industry to accept a "don't read the comments" mantra. This is a problem because it stifles audience interaction, which is key to keeping journalism alive and healthy. In April this year, The Guardian resourced their comments dataset to produce a series on what they called the phenomenon of online harassment. They explored the ethical and editorial issues around comment moderation. It's an interactive article. They gave real examples of comments posted to their site and allow you as the reader to select what you would and wouldn't allow published, and you can see how that lines up with their moderation decisions. They've also included a counter that tracks the amount of comments posted each day against how many were removed by the moderator for inappropriate content. Like The Guardian, most online publications moderate their comment sections. This is done either by human moderators or by automatons or a mix of both. Some outlets, however, have decided to shut off their comments entirely. Popular Science turned their comments off when research showed comments on news articles could actually affect the way readers interpret the article's content. Obviously, as a science publication, this was an issue for them. Here's David Mosher explaining on the Media Shift podcast why Popular Science was one of the first sites to turn off their comments in 2013.
Comments have a strong bearing of how people interpret the article, and there are an increasing number of studies to support that notion. And if you're not able to moderate those comments effectively, if you're not able to engage with your audience on the site, that can affect people's interpretation of a journalistic product.
Quartz is another publication without comments. When the site launched in late 2012, it didn't include a comment box in the layout. In August 2013, they introduced their annotations feature, where readers can make notes in the sidebar of a story, much like how you can annotate audio in SoundCloud. So each annotation is related to a particular paragraph or section of the story. Journalism giant Reuters followed suit and shut off their comment on all articles except opinion pieces. Reuters web editor Dan Colarusso said that only 1% of Reuters' readership commented on articles, which was the main reason to move the online conversation from on-site to social media in November 2014. In the same Media Shift podcast episode, Colarusso said that commenters self-police each other on social media, and that he didn't believe it was a place for Reuters journalists to engage with commenters online.
We are governed by trust principles in our editorial and our news coverage. So our reporters, even if they had the time, if they weren't filing 5 and 6 updates, are kind of dissuaded from engaging and providing any opinion or any of their own views and things. So it's very difficult. It would be difficult for them to engage with commentators.
But during this wave of turning off comments, there's a lot of talk about how important a resource they are for journalists.
So at the same time that we had this movement of the comments, a lot of websites shutting off the comments, there was everywhere talk about we need to talk more with the community, with our readers, with the people formerly known as the audience.
That was Pedro Burgos speaking at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. He's a Brazilian journalist with a serious interest in commenting and a huge advocate for the benefits of reader-writer engagement. He gave an example of an Atlantic article written in October last year titled "Debating Mass Incarceration." Its content is almost entirely reader reactions to an earlier story on Black families in the age of mass incarceration. It pairs these audience contributions with other reports, and the result is a far deeper exploration of the issue than one journalist or a team of journalists could do on their own. It stands as a perfect example of how comments and audience interaction can be harnessed to tell a story to its fullest. This is an idea that's been bouncing around at the NeimanLab recently. Andrew Lowsowsky predicts that in 2016, publications will make a mental shift away from comments and towards contributions. From say anything, whoever you are, to how can our most dedicated readers contribute. Part of this hinges on changing the culture in the comments section, which at the moment has a tendency towards the toxic, because minimal effort is being done to improve the quality of the dialogue. Greg Barber, who is a colleague of Lowsowsky's at the Coral Project, we'll talk about them a little later, summed it up perfectly in a presentation at the International Journalism Festival in April this year.
If they walk into a pie fight, they're likely to pick up a pie. If they walk into a reasoned discussion, they'll contribute reasonably.
With civil discussion, comments can be a journalist's strongest resource. Lowsowsky says comments, or as I should probably more correctly say, contributions, can lead to exclusive content, a closer audience, better brand connections, and error corrections from readers. Dave Mosher from Popular Science agrees that a well-moderated comment section is a powerful tool for a journalist.
I would always check the comments because the audience was moderated. And in those comments, I found leads to stories. I found very valid corrections, pieces of information that I missed and made the story better.
Another prediction from the NeimanLab came from Gina, Masullo, Chen, who takes this idea one step further. She believes that in 2016, publications need to look beyond moderation and towards journalists actually becoming involved, becoming a participant in these commenting communities. She says that a journalist's job is to explain to the public what's going on, and if the public is learning through comments, journalists must be part of that discussion. Interestingly, she says that news has become the conversation around the news in a sense, that the conversation about the news in many ways has become a new version of the news for many people. Now, not everyone agrees with this. The Reuters web editor Colin Russo had a rather blunt and different opinion on the matter.
News isn't a conversation. News is news. The conversation is the conversation. We can come to it wide-eyed and say that news is a conversation, but news is part of the conversation. News starts a conversation, but news is news. News is these people did this thing at this time in this place.
Regardless of your opinion, research shows that a journalist's involvement in comments actually increases the level of civility and evidence that commenters bring to the discussion. This is a promising counter-argument to Popular Science's original reason to turn off their comments. Talia Straude is an associate professor of communication studies at the University of Texas, and she looked into the matter. I'll let her tell you about her findings.
And what we found is that when the reporter was involved in the comment section, incivility reduced by about 15%. And we also saw a significant increase in the provision of evidence by other commenters in the space, both of which we find to be really encouraging results from the perspective of deliberative democracy or from the perspective of really encouraging a civil and safe space for people to share their opinions below the news.
Let's look at that term, deliberative democracy. It pushes us towards the idea of adopting a democratic approach to news sourcing. It also raises a difficult question. How do journalists know what their audience want to read about? This was the theme of Molly de Aguiar's NeimanLab prediction for 2016. She brainstormed how journalists can start building news with the community, not just for the community. Some tools already exist to do this. The Listening Post in New Orleans is a perfect example of news content being determined and contributed to by the audience. Similar examples of audience-driven content comes from recent platforms like Grasswire and Hearken. On Grasswire, users can upload their own stories that are either confirmed or refuted by other users. This pushes more reputable news to the top and less reputable to the bottom. It also pushes the most relevant to the top and least relevant to the bottom. Hearken is another platform. It partners with the public during the news development process, so users can submit and vote on stories they want published before journalists put the effort into research and reporting. Keeping things local, an Australian example is the relatively new ABC series Story Hunters. This show follows a similar process by asking their audience what stories they want reported and then work from there. The future of this new space, the digital interaction between audience and journalist, is the primary focus of the Coral Project. The Coral Project is a collaboration between the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Mozilla to reinvent the avenue of communication between writers and readers. Here's Greg Barber again talking at the International Journalism Festival about the aim of the Coral Project.
We're not looking to build a better comment box. We're looking to think about this space differently, and to all of us as an industry come together and think about how do we want to engage with users? How do users want to engage with us? We're asking them too, and help build the sort of software and practices that will get us that.
They've been bouncing a few ideas around at the Coral Project. One is to create a database of a news site's commenters and having a record of their online activity on a news site. With this, publishers could also keep a profile of each commenter to see if other journalists have engaged with that contributor before, or if they've been used as a resource in a previous story. While I feel that this errs on the invasive and may need a little more work before it gets put into practice, it does take a big step toward putting more energy into positive, useful contributors. It flips the way we think of commenters. So instead of publications putting all their energy into cutting out bad behaviour, we can start rewarding and collaborating with good commenters. Because as Barbara explains here, these loyal readers keep publications afloat.
Your commenters and the people who read your comments and the people who engage with your website in other ways, they take polls, they respond to quizzes, etc. These are your most loyal users. And I think news organizations dismiss these folks at their peril because they're the future of our business and we need to make more of them, not fewer of them.
Barbara's comments are echoed in Molly de Aguiar's Neiman prediction. She writes that journalism that truly serves and invests in the public creates a virtuous feedback loop in which the public will invest in and protect the journalism. With the average user's voice becoming clearer and louder in the age of online interaction, it is crucial to listen to them rather than turn away or turn off their comments. When publications dismiss their audience input, they're also dismissing the people that they rely on for support. The ground beneath journalism is shaking as the industry adapts to the digital age, but its relevance can be solidified by establishing real relationships with the audience, or more correctly, the people formerly known as the audience.